Welcome to everyone, including those via Facebook and YouTube Live, on the Love 101 Facebook page and or YouTube channel. Family time is about your issues, your relationships, your at-home family, your community family, and your global family. Family time is produced by Family Life Ministries, and our aim is to enable healthy families, which will lead to healthy nations. Stay with us, listening, and please join in. My name is Halcyon Reed. When something is somebody's fault, we want them to suffer, we want them punished, we want them to pay, we want it to be their responsibility to fix it. But that's not how it works. When you are a victim, when you're in victim mode, you are stuck in suffering. The road to power is in taking responsibility. These are words attributed to Will Smith, aka the Fresh Prince. This evening, we want to look at the issue of fault or blame versus responsibility and empowerment. To help us do that is psychologist Dr. Leahcim Semaj, founder and chief ideator of Above and Beyond. But before we speak with him, here's what we want you to do. Tell us, why is it important to take responsibility for our actions? Tell us via WhatsApp, whether text or voice notes. Make sure they're no longer than 30 seconds, to 876-997-3125, or you may post on the Love 101 Facebook page, or you may call the studio lines at 876-968-8327 or 876-968-8328 to participate. And throughout the program, we'll share what you share. We'll be welcome back to Family Time Love 101. Our topic today is fault versus responsibility, the road to empowerment. Here's something you've probably heard many times. You can think, say, or do whatever you want as long as you're willing to face the consequences. And here's another one. With freedom comes responsibility. In hearing all of this, why is it important to take responsibility for our actions? WhatsApp your text or voice notes. Make sure they're no longer than 30 seconds, though, to 876-997-3125, or you may post on the Love 101 Facebook page, or call the studio lines at 876-968-8327 or 876-968-8328 to participate. And throughout the program, we'll share your thoughts. With us this evening is Dr. Leahcim Semaj. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm well. Happy to be with you.
Thank you so much for being here. So we're going to get right into the discussion. So we want for you to give us some definition, or what do you consider to be fault or blame before we get into the discussion. We want to define, fault or blame versus responsibility.
Well, fault or blame is really just attributing a sort of direct or indirect causality. That let's say I hit you. So you are attributing motive and action. I hit you. Directly speaking, the most empirical thing, my hand bridged the gap between my body and your face, and impact was made. With a good lawyer, it could say, "Oh, you've heard the one where the woman claimed that she walked into the door because she didn't want to tell the friends that her husband beat her up. I walked into the door, I fell down." So then you give the fault to some other entity rather than that which it belonged. Responsibility, on the other hand, indicates that causality. This person caused that to happen. I think it's a bold decision on the part of, for you, for doing a show like this. You're a producer of the station, because it's not really fashionable, especially now. We're into a very interesting time where, yes, this victim mentality. I'm happy to be doing the program, because for years, I've had a workshop that have been promoted, and the title of it is How Not to Be a Victim. And I cover all areas of life, how not to be a victim. So I'm giving you my bias right up front, because there are too many people who literally, once you start with a victim mentality, how can you be victorious? If everything bad that happens to you is somebody else caused it, then you can take no credit for your life. It's
Right.
somebody else. So then when we did little, my mother dropped me. And at school, the teacher never liked me. And my brother and sister eat out my food. It's a pattern. So,
Yeah.
I am happy to be discussing this with some issues that are probably not fashionable, not sexy at this time. That when do we deal with responsibility? And I want to deal with responsibility
Mhm.
on both sides.
Mhm.
Both sides, because sometimes you get the impression that, well, then the fault is only on one side. But I see
Mhm.
issues of responsibility on both sides of almost any action, any
Mhm.
crisis. Both contributed, and unless we attempt to fix both, we won't really change things. We won't really transform
Mhm.
things. And I can give you some biblical references. That's why I love being on Love 101, because you all like Bible things. Yeah, man. I can drop you some biblical
Yes.
injunction, where Jesus actually
Well, let's
said
hear
it.
them.
Okay,
Let's hear them.
let's start with it. All right. I examine all the things we call miracles of Jesus, and
Mhm.
you can break them down to just some. You must do something. Every single one. That's what he said.
Okay.
You
Okay.
must do. Even Lazarus the dead. Lazarus
Mhm.
come forth. Huh? My son, bring the boy here to me.
Mhm.
Huh? The wine done, fill the jars with water. The feeding of the 5,000, make people sit down and groups of 50 each.
Mhm.
So that we see this change comes about when you do something, not
Mhm.
just get somebody else to do something. And the other one I like to use is the prodigal son.
Mhm.
Did the father go look for the boy and
Mhm.
spend time and bring him back? No. The boy went about his life, hit rough bottom, eat out a
Mhm.
half pen, and then when he came to himself, did he come back and cuss him, Father, oh, you? He said, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before
Mhm.
thee, and I
Right.
no longer worth to be called thy son. Will you not have me back as one of your hired hands? That to me is a very
Mhm.
powerful statement for all of us. That
Right.
he came back and he begged for forgiveness because he accepted
Mhm.
responsibility for his actions. So between those parables and so on, I see a pattern there. The importance for us to take is only when
Response.
you accept responsibility, you can now bring about transformation.
Right. Okay. All right. So we have a few cases here. So I'm gonna just read them, and you can give me your thoughts on them. All right.
Sure.
First case. This is a domestic relationship. So a woman taunts and nags the man, even becomes physically and violently abusive with him. He then hits back and causes serious harm. She is called the victim. Does she need to assume any responsibility in her becoming a victim? What's the difference in being at fault versus taking responsibility? Is there any here? Talk to us about that one.
She has to own her part of that equation,
Mm-hmm.
because no matter how much the man change, the man also has to own his part. And let me give you my thing on both sides. No matter
Mm-hmm.
how, and we actually teach this to young men. You start from at home. Your
Mm-hmm.
sister is taunting you, and you hit her, and she runs, "Mommy, mommy, John hit me." Mommy tells
Mm-hmm.
John, "You don't hit your sister."
Mm-hmm.
We teach boys that you don't hit your sister. But then, Mary, you don't taunt your brother. You don't do things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So that
Right.
we have to give it on both sides.
Right.
That action and reaction are equal and opposite. The
Mm-hmm.
man is not right to hit her. In fact, he's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There are more constructive way to resolve dispute and differences. But we have to also explain to women that women master two aspects of the conflict: the verbal and the emotional. The
Mm-hmm.
man master one, the physical.
Right.
By age 5, developmentally, girls learn something called malice. Come on, don't talk to Halcyon no more. And from tomorrow you go to school, them stop talk to you and
Mm-hmm.
malice you.
Not
withholding.
being your friend.
You're not my friend again. Boys don't do that. Boys have never learned that kind of thing. So that's part of the whole thing. So real learning is required on both sides. Because I tell people that there are some women that no man would ever think of hitting. From day one, she make you know, boss, if you even think it, you're in trouble with me. So that yes, there is responsibility. There's enough fault and blame to go around. And
Right.
you have to also look at both sides, and both sides have to take responsibility for their
Yes,
behavior.
and yeah, it's a very important thing that we need to teach our children as well, because I've seen it, I've seen girls, they'll go on there, they'll give the boy one slap in his back or in his head, and he can't do anything because he was taught not to hit a girl.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And
And then she
if
use
he
that,
does it, yeah, and if he does it, if and she goes and complain,
he gets in
or
trouble.
for the poor boy,
Yeah, yeah,
she
yeah,
gets away.
yeah, yeah.
So let's compare this with another situation, right? There's a woman who flirts with a man to the point of near penetration, meaning sexual intercourse. But then she says no, but he goes ahead anyway. What do you have to say about that?
Again, sticky, but the rules apply. Here's how I say it. Let's from
Mm,
the man side. One of the things that men supposed to understand that no is a complete sentence.
mm,
And men should understand that a woman has the right to change her mind at any time.
mm.
So if she changes her mind, then look, she changed her mind.
Right.
All bets are off. So from the man,
Mhm.
the woman has to understand that listen, you're playing with fire. The consequences, there are times you're going to get burned. So that
Mhm.
yes, and by the way, this is more than flirting. That's flirting is a verbal thing, it's a public
Yeah.
thing. Once you get to the point that penetration is possible, that clearly proximity was decreased significantly.
Right. Hmm.
And there are people who get pleasure. I've heard women talk that how what she do to the man and what she do, I should not give him nothing.
Hmm.
And that's a pride that I did that. But
Hmm.
I would not encourage women to do that because if the man goes beyond, technically it is rape. Once a woman does, and he need to understand the law and the rules.
Hmm.
One, no is a complete sentence. Two, a woman has the right to change her mind at any point, and you have to honor that. But a woman, I suggest, playing with fire, you may get burned. You may get burned. The man may. I had an attorney of mine gave me a case that just stuck in my mind years. These boys were playing football, high
Hmm.
school, and they take off their clothes and change and put them down the side. And when they came back, there were some girls watching them for a while, and the girls disappeared. And then when they came back, all their clothes was gone.
Hmm.
Once I know where them and where one of the girls I'm living now. And they went down by the girls were there and they say, you want the clothes, come for them now. When they went to the house, the young ladies were disrobed and invited the young men to participate.
Hmm.
Now, hmm, some months later, one of the girls was with child. And then she, with under pressure, she told her grandmother, well, who was the? No, this boy was 15.
Oh no.
So what are we
Wow.
talking about now?
Mm.
He was guilty of a crime. He was guilty of
Right.
a crime. And the lawyer indicated to me the amount of time how this boy's life was totally disrupted and what happened as a result. But the thing about it, this girl was underage. So too was the boy.
Hmm.
But the whole incident, this was not something where the boys constructed and so on, and the girls orchestrated the behavior. So
Hmm.
understand that, look, both sides. And in a case like this, if we have to attribute blame, the girls were the one that literally facilitated, encouraged uh, the interaction. So
Hmm.
that we really have to come down on both. The boys, listen, gentlemen, you can't make woman tie you out, so. You can't make woman, huh? Boy, but you call me name and must hold me soft and all of that. Yes, it's all right. So we have to look at the case both sides. There's enough guilt to go around, and we should attribute it proportionately and make sure people understand that we are responsible for our actions.
And Joseph ran away, but he still got blamed, eh?
Yes, yes, yes.
Right. So I'm thinking about there are lots of situations where, people go out, they party and, get drunk. If a woman, she gets drunk, and, she went off, had sex with this person, I don't know what we're, and then afterwards she's now saying, no, I didn't want to, this person, did this or so on,
Again, similar case. We have to look at it from both sides. For me, we have to educate, socialize, train our men that look, if a woman who is drunk is not in a position to consciously make a decision, and it is, as for me, I pride myself for being a gentleman. The role of a gentleman is to protect a woman, not to take advantage of her.
right?
But listen, not everyone aspires to be gentlemen. All right? So that if you find yourself with a dog, you're going to get bit. Dogs bite. Not every time you find yourself with a gentleman. You, as a woman going out, be very careful what you drink, who you drink with, for. There's so many women within our culture now who walk with what we call vex money.
Yes.
They walk with your vex money.
Of course.
Because in the case that things are not going in the manner in which you are, you can just listen, it's all right. I'll find my way home. Because you realize that the other person had something else in mind that you weren't interested in pursuing. So yes, she has an issue there. Getting drunk in a context whereby anybody getting drunk in public, that's dangerous. Getting drunk in the presence of somebody that you are not sure, you don't know that this person will either protect you or take advantage of you. That's a serious thing. So with socialization, training, responsibility need to be preached on both sides of this equation. There's no pride. They are, let's not say men now, males who would pride themselves in a situation like that. That the woman drunk is a man, she drunk like a bat. So let's get her 2 more drink and that's where we are now. So no. We have a problem on both sides. The woman is not without guilt. She has a contribution to make it. And the male who took advantage of the situation, he too has a problem and should be dealt with accordingly.
Yeah. So in this discussion so far, you've been giving us some tips, but I want to make them very clear, for the audience, right? You gave some tips for men, some tips for women. One clear tip was, if a woman says no, it means no. It's a complete sentence. You said that. So whether she drunk or in her right state of mind, no is no, right?
Absolutely.
Right. For the women, they have a responsibility. Can you say it explicitly to these women in cases like these? What is their responsibility in cases like these?
Look, again, it's not, what I'm about to say is not fashionable. Because yes, you're supposed to say, it is true that how a woman dresses does not directly indicate that some behavior will take place, because men have raped grandmothers in their 90s.
Yeah.
Not to mention people who are scantily dressed, all right? But what I say to women, do not advertise something that's not for sale. Do not advertise something that it is not being offered to the public. There are women who pride themselves. They like to tease. They like to flirt. They like to garner attention. They like men to make comments at them and so on. Right? It's a dangerous thing. Especially, why advertise something if it is not available? So then you advertise it, meaning that you dress in a, and look, we're not playing games. We know what you're dressing because you wish to attract attention to your body. You wish to show what you have. You wish to create a imagery of what was possible. But then now if it gets out of hand, you have to also. I know women who will not answer the door if they're not appropriately dressed. They'll not go to the door because there's a doorbell, and no, I'm not dressed. There's something called backstage and onstage behavior. There's private and there's public behavior. We used to have something called underwear, you remember that? Underwear, which was supposed to be under. The only person supposed to see your underwear, first of all, is you, your family, your husband, your intimate partner. But when you're wearing underwear on the road, you are playing with fire. So it doesn't give the man license, but you too have a responsibility to don't stoke the fire.
Yes, I can't help thinking about the men who are showing their underwear on the road. What do you have to say about that?
Slack. You want to look during my graduate school years, I spent a year working in Trenton State Maximum Security Prison, well, as an undergraduate student in Rutgers. And I saw firsthand how that process developed in the 70s. In prison, especially maximum security, you don't have belt, you don't have lace. So naturally, the pants is going to sag because the underwear have elastic. So that a man who has been in this for a while, in prison for a while, he gets comfortable with his pants sagging because it's just so now that associate yourself now, me a bad man, a prison me I come from, So it became the fashion for the thug culture. Me a bad man, right?
But there's a question. Oh, go ahead.
No, and I mean, my eldest son, who's now in his 30s, there was a time when he was going to school in the States and he started to drift in that direction. And I explained to him, not in my cabinet. Because the way you dress is signal. You're making a statement. Yeah. So do you want people to think of you as a thug or as a gentleman? And we got through to him and he said, Daddy, whenever I go to a store, when he used to make his pants sag and so on, as I go in the store and start to look for something, the security guards start walking around and follow me. Because
of how he looks.
But when he pulled up his pants at his waist and when he went into a store, all of a sudden now people start to follow him. Excuse me, sir, where can I find so-and-so? Where can I find so-and-so? They assume that he worked there. They assume as the manager of the store. So you make a decision on what signal you want to send. And yes, there are some, let's not even call them young men, some boys who literally now they want people to see them as thugs and be afraid of them. So yes, that's the purpose of that dress.
Okay, so nobody is turned on by a man's underwear in that sense then, showing.
Well, there's a context which is suggested that you may be advertising, if you're advertising your bottom and your underwear and so on. I don't know of maybe what you're selling or what you're offering, so let's just leave this one right there, because as it stands, even in terms of just eroticism and arousal, men are the visual ones. Women are more auditory, but lyrics me, tell me something nice and so on and all of that. But the visual cues are usually more. Yes, you have some women but I don't think pants sagging and underwear is one signal that either you want your bottom to be exposed or you want people to say you're a bad man, so I'll leave it right there.
Back to family time. Our guest today is a psychologist, Dr. Leahcim Semaj, founder and chief ideator of Above and Beyond. Our discussion topic today is fault versus responsibility, the road to empowerment. And our question to all of you, our listeners and viewers, is why is it important to take responsibility for our actions? WhatsApp your text and voice notes. Make sure they're no longer than 30 seconds to 876-997-3125 or post on the Love 101 Facebook page, or you may call our studio lines at 876-968-8327 or 28 to participate. Also encouraging you to friend us on Facebook at FLM Family Life Ministries, follow us on Instagram at FLMJA, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Family Life Ministries, FLMJA. The numbers for the FLM head office are 876-920-1034 or 926-8101. If you or someone you know need to talk to a counselor, those are the numbers to call, and we'll tell you them again at the end of the show. All right, so welcome back with us, Dr. Leahcim Semaj.
My pleasure.
All right, so we're going to move on with some more discussion on some topics. So here's another case. Someone makes up a story about you. They think it's a harmless prank, or maybe they were intent on mischief. The story goes viral. You're hunted and nearly killed by people who believe the story, unrelated persons. The fabricator didn't hold a knife or throw the rock. They were nowhere near the scene of the crime. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, in the culture and times in which we live, that becomes even more so. And again, biblically, the whole notion of you are condemned by what comes out of your mouth. Huh? It is what comes out of your mouth that defiles you. You said something, and it can have some long-term indirect consequences. And I make it a duty, especially we have this thing called social media. There's a time when we never had social media, just regular media. Media had persons who policed it. You had program directors, person who determined what would go on air and what was not libelous, what was not slanderous, and so on. But now with social media, everybody's a broadcaster. Everybody's a broadcaster.
Right.
We need to start teaching the responsibility of broadcasting. I make it a point of duty. I do not repost or post or repeat anything that I can't substantiate.
Right.
The notion, even as Jamaicans have a very loose way of doing things. If I'm not so, I'm near so. That is slackness. So oftentimes, and you know that now with the cybercrime laws, that persons have been charged for passing on faulty information. Even at the level of media, there was an interesting case some time ago where somebody made a claim publicly and it was broadcasted. But interestingly, a number of media houses initially backed off the story and apologized.
Good. Right.
But the person that initially aired it did not. And I think there were some very strong consequences.
Right.
So that we need to start talking about these things, that when you put something out there, you can't take it back. The worst you can do is well, I apologize. I didn't really intend for that to happen. But we have to watch with mouth, watch with tongue, watch what you say, because behavior, action, words have consequences. So you may have said it in jest. You may have said it in jest, but the consequences, you are still responsible because you are the one. You didn't you didn't administer the blow, but there are things that you said that cause people to behave in a particular manner. So we have to start to really socialize and teach people that you have to watch what comes out of your mouth. Watch what you say, watch what you post, because it has consequences.
Definitely. And I mean, you may say, okay, well, I only said it. I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But you have some responsibility there. If you didn't say or do any such thing, then that person would not be hurt.
And the difference is that, especially with social media, if I say something, I am a known entity. It just said somebody just posted.
Right.
But then now, once you can identify the source of it, and that's why we do have capacity now to see where this thing originates
from, right?
And which IP address did it come from? So we're gonna have more of these cases because people use the anonymity, especially especially with something like Twitter or so, when you don't necessarily use your right name and so. But Your actions, your words have consequences, and we have to be careful.
Right. Right. So one of our listeners said, taking responsibility is extremely important. One has to know that there are consequences to your actions. We all must think before we act. Yeah, that's what one of our listeners says. Same thing you were just saying.
Absolutely. And you see, Jamaica society will like cas. And
Gossip.
especially uh, the kind of things that dominate. Look, we have 39 radio stations now, huh? And up teen of YouTube channels that just focus on cas and so on. And if you notice the things that dominate our media nowadays, Ray, Susu, Cascas, and lowest common denominator. How
That's
many
the best
things?
entertainment for people.
Yeah, but how many things are there intended to uplift,
Exactly.
to teach, to educate? But even more, much of what they call humor is something that degrade or denigrate. If you notice, the things that people like to repeat are things that destroys,
Right.
lowers somebody. And there's a model that says, people of limited stature, psychologically and socially, you improve yourself by pushing others down. So our society, that is well entrenched in our society, as
It
opposed
is
to using things. Even the media in general, if something good happens, that doesn't make news. Something bad
true.
happens is the head. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
the same thing. We really need a
Shift.
positive, well,
Yeah.
more than a shift, a revolution, where we start to, this notion of taking the worst of us, impose it on all of us, is that that's all we were. How about taking the best of us and share to the rest of us so we can become as good as any of us?
Right.
It's a shift. It's a different kind of mentality. But this
Right.
whole notion that you can get the mileage out of it in terms of something, but action behavior is governed by consequences. That's one of the basic laws of psychology. Behavior is governed by consequences, and on both
Certainly.
sides. So in the cases that you gave earlier, the woman's behavior, the man's behavior have their own direct consequences. So we really have to educate both sides in terms of
Certainly.
what they do, how they do it, and what are the consequences of those behaviors.
Certainly. Before we move on to our next case, let's listen to our voice note. We have a voice note from one of our listeners.
Presenter. Just I was take a look at that David, who has called Uriah from the war and to take full control of his wife. He refuses, and he took his wife away and get her pregnant. But he didn't allow to keep the child, although he had the child responsibility. Was not allowed to keep the child. The child died. But then when Nathan came to him, he admitted to his fault and he paid the price. Good thing about it, he repented, God forgave him. And I'm saying that I believe that everyone that does things that is wrong supposed to stand up to their responsibility. He stood up to his responsibility, stood up to his fault, and he asked forgiveness, and he got it. David is an example to us, and that we shouldn't do what David did, but we should realize that when we do our thing, responsibility is ours, and we have to pay for it. He paid because that child would never get to grow up. He had never get to love up and hug up that child as a child growing up because the child died because of his unreasonable action.
Interesting dimension. And if I could add something to that, and I posted something along this line today with respect to our current situation, that I see two things that precedes forgiveness. Hmm? The first one is confession. Huh? And the second one
Okay.
is repent. Hmm? If you don't confess your sins, how can you be forgiven? If you don't repent, on what basis are you being forgiven? So you see that, look, it requires, that's your responsibility. You have to take responsibility. And that's how, in order for you to get forgiveness, the first responsibility is confession. Remember we talked earlier about the prodigal son? Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and I am no longer worthy to be called thy son. Right? So, yes, it's back to the same mood that we're talking about. We take responsibility for our actions. So that if your daughter went out and this young man really treated her ungentlemanly, we will clearly be very upset with him. But we'll also we'll also talk to our daughters and say, listen, I don't think you should be going out by yourself with somebody you don't know. I don't ladies don't dress like that. And I have three daughters, and I tell them from the very early, you don't advertise what you're not selling. Worse yet, that you're not giving away. Huh? So that you have to show that you are responsible. You are responsible for the words that come out of your mouth. Clothes is costume. What are you packaging? What are you? It's not, well, I feel to wear this, I feel to wear that. When students tell me these things, I say, well, all right, all right. I'm the lecturer. I walked in here in bathing suit. Would you take me serious? I
No.
just come in because it's hot. Yeah?
Unless you're going to lecture him in swimming.
Unless it's a swimming class. Huh? I have a little old t-shirt and so, because boy, I'm hot, man. No, we're playing games with people's lives the way we do these things. But responsibility. And it's at every level of our society, we have to make sure we start making sure people understand responsibility. And what's the part? There's a notion, that anything that takes place in the public sphere that is not regulated, the government will ultimately have to subsidize it. Just think about it. Anything that takes place. If we don't regulate how people use the road, then you have to subsidize what happens, the consequences. If you don't regulate how people use land, how the ownership and how borders and boundaries are respected, if you don't regulate how people behave one to another, and by the way, it's not easy, Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychology, says that the two main issues that cause pain to people. One, the frailty of our body vis-a-vis the environment, and the inadequacy of the rules that we develop to regulate our behavior one to another. Constantly moving. How do we regulate our behavior one to another? So the notion of responsibility. Look at the slogan which emerged over the last couple of years about drink with responsibility. Huh?
Yeah.
Responsible drinking. We don't tell you, when this campaign first started, when we started talking about the breathalyzer and so on, I proposed a campaign to the two of the major companies involved in alcohol. Since you're talking about drink responsible, why don't you teach people what responsible drinking is? And I'm a suspect that they never took me on it. What I had in mind, I created a chart. Huh? And you have a man and you have a woman. And you see the woman is 120 pounds, the man is 240 pounds, because body weight affects the rate at which you metabolize alcohol. And then you show how many drinks per hour. You say the average woman can metabolize one drink, huh? Whereas the man may be able to do two. And I say you have all of these charts and you put them in the bars so people know what responsible drinking is. Nobody took me on this. Because even though they say it, but did they really want people to drink responsible? Because drinking responsible means that, you're going to really...
Less money for you.
So We say it, and it's a wonderful slogan. It has been with us for a while now. But somebody has to show people and explain to people what does responsible drinking. Another thing was never caught on in Jamaica. In the US, this thing called designated driver. You've heard of the concept. We're all going out together. All right, Halcyon, tonight you're the designated driver. So you're not going to drink anything at all. You're the one that makes sure we all get home safe.
Right.
So tomorrow, Kathy, yes, let Kathy be the designated driver. We do have, that concept is not a Jamaican concept, where somebody should take the responsibility of making sure everybody gets home safe. They are the designated driver. So that we have to start providing people with the cues. What does responsibility mean? And by the way, responsibility comes with some other words attached. Responsibility to, responsibility for. So it automatically involves other people. It's not just you.
Dr. Semaj, I want us to get to the road to empowerment. So what are some of the benefits in taking responsibility for our actions? Let's talk about that. The victim mentality versus victim blaming. Right.
Life is not capricious. It means that you can determine your path. There's an African saying that if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. Take any road. But if you know you want to end up in crossroads, well, when you leave downtown, that bus is going to Harborview. That one is going to Portmore. So you got to get on the road that's going up the crossroads. So that responsibility is the only way by which you can positively chart your life. If you don't take responsibility, then you will be like a leaf in the wind. There's a wonderful saying that only, you remember Sarah Palin? She was a very forgetful, not a very memorable vice president candidate some years ago in the US. And the one thing she said that made sense, that it's only a dead fish that goes with the tide. So that if you don't take responsibility and you go with the tide, where do you end up? Out in the sea. So responsibility means you chart a course. It's not just what your friends say. It's not what is just fashionable. It's not what is the easiest course of action. You make a decision. And why so many of our students are not doing well? Because they will probably start with their parents. Parents don't take responsibility in terms of how you socialize your children and the consequence of their behavior. Children don't take responsibility. If I know that I have homework, by the way, you have to start by imposing consequences on children, I told my children that TV doesn't exist between Sunday night and Thursday night because you have school the next morning. But that you have no homework, not true. You have there's 4 kinds of homework. What you learned yesterday to review, what you're gonna do tomorrow to preview, the homework the teacher gave you, and plus things that you are directly interested in. So there's always homework to do. I also told my children that, by the way, anybody you see on TV, their money maker ready. Yours make yet? Yours make yet?
One.
There's a third one. You can't leave your pot. Go watch somebody else's pot cook. It did not forget anyone to finish. So the issue of responsibility is only when you take responsibility. So if bad things happen to you, you must also take responsibility and ask myself, now, how did I contribute to this? What was my contribution to this? What was my contribution? Because if you don't take responsibility when bad things happen, you can't take responsibility when good things happen. So when good things happen, it's just good luck then. It's just good luck. But luck,
that's an interesting perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. They said luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So when you stay prepared, any opportunity you get, you take advantage of it. So the notion of taking responsibility. As a nation, we don't have to beg somebody but beg your thing, no man. Do something for yourself. So that this notion of dependency that we create, parents have to teach children about responsibility. You give children chores, and you give children, all right, I'm going to give you so much per week as your pocket money, but in return, you're responsible for the garbage or the dishes, or you have to do so and so. So we teach responsibility. Absolutely
Definitely.
important for our development.
What do you have to say to persons who tend to have the victim mentality, you know? What are the dangers? And what
Danger
are,
is that
yeah.
you will never grow as a human being. Because again, if you hear it earlier, I said, "Boy, when I was young, my mother did this, and my brother and sister." Yes, the things that happen to you when you're young can impact your life. But at some point, you have to take responsibility and you have to change the narrative. That's the only way you will grow. If you think about it, almost every one of us that amount to anything positive, at some point, somebody saw more in you than you saw in yourself. And they insisted that you behave in a certain way and you listened. So that if nobody ever took responsibility for themselves, if you're always blaming somebody else for your actions or for the consequences of your behavior, then that's one of the lowest form of behavior. If you look at moral development, psychology of moral development, the first stage is called good boy, bad boy, or good girl. You do something to avoid punishment. You do something because they say you're a good boy. But as you get more mature morally, ultimately you get to the point where you do the right things because it is the right thing to do. Not because somebody's going to reward you, somebody's going to tell you good boy, good girl. But you now internalize it and you do the right thing. Jamaica, we have a long, long way to go. One of my most, Jamaica, there's a cultural reality, anything that touches the ground is no longer yours. Think about it. If a chicken truck is going around the corner and some box of chicken drop, you realize what happens? Immediately people come start grab the chicken. Not to give it back to the driver, put it back on the truck. If cement drop off the truck, everybody feel now once it touches the ground, it belongs to everybody else. Anybody who can grab it first, it belongs to them. If you notice what happens in Jamaica when there's a story about somebody finding something and returning it, how so many people say, "Oh, an idiot. Look at my idiot. Can find money and give it back, can find somebody and give it back." So we've come a long way down. So responsibility for doing the right thing, because it's not just responsibility to each other, responsibility for each other. That's why we're here. We are responsible for each other. We are our brother's keeper. The whole notion of it's just incredible. Even within the households, when you have situations where the most common incestuous situation involves stepfather, stepdaughter, and you say, "Boy, I'm really my daughter," technically speaking, and the girl put them a face, Yes, that will happen because little girls, as they mature, they demonstrate their sensuality and so on. But you are the adult in the room.
Certainly.
You are the person supposed to behave yourself, little girl. You can't dress like that in the house. You put on something. Right? So at every level, we have to start saying these things that are not fashionable. That the whole notion, that responsibility. So you start from early by teaching children, giving them chores and holding them responsible.
Yes.
You're responsible to and responsible for.
We have a text from Derval Graham, or studio host. He says, on taking responsibility, Proverb 28, verse 13. He who conceals his transgressions will not prosper, but he who confesses and forsakes them will find compassion.
Well, again, didn't we say it is confession and repentance that is the prerequisite to forgiveness?
Right.
So we can find it all over. If you don't confess that, listen, I did something wrong, I did wrong,
Right.
then there'll be no grounds for you to be forgiven.
All
And
right.
by the way, forgiveness don't mean foo-foo, you know. In order for me to forgive you, if I forgive you, I'm not going to put you in a position to repeat the transgression, you know. I'm not going to put no butter in a puss's mouth again. So I'm going to hide the butter from now on.
All right, we'll have to wrap up right now. But do you have any tips you want to leave with our audiences? You know, maybe how to treat victims, or tips for encouraging, encouragement for
But
victims.
again, look, folks, the nice thing about life, you know, is that you can always, the nice thing, tomorrow is always another day. Every day the sun rises, you have a chance to do it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? The fact that no matter how dirty and smutty your past is, your future is perfect. All you
Thank you
have to
so
do
much.
is accept the responsibility for that. Because once you accept the responsibility, it is now possible. So that
Yes.
you can make a decision today. I will take responsibility for my action. Now, what do I need to do? And you make it happen.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Semaj. I believe it was a great program, and we are really, really happy to have you.
My
All
pleasure.
right. Thanks to our listeners.